December 1941. German U-boats patrol the Atlantic coast. America has been at war for 3 weeks. And in the mountains of North Carolina, armed guards stand watch over a room that does not officially exist. Inside, hanging on steel racks behind curtains and locked steel doors, 62 paintings. Rembrandt's self-portrait, Raphael's Alba Madonna, Gilbert Stuart's George Washington, the face on every dollar bill. Vermeer, Van Dyck, Titian. Millions of dollars of art hidden in a mansion built by a man who never wanted crowds. The guards patrol in shifts. Visitors walk through the house every day, tourists who paid admission to see how the other half lived. They pass within feet of the sealed room. They have no idea what sits on the other side of that wall. The house is Biltmore, 175,000 square feet, largest private residence in America. It was never supposed to be this. It was supposed to be a quiet retreat, a place to read, a forest to heal, a dream of self-sufficiency. Instead, it became a machine that consumed money faster than even Vanderbilt wealth could supply. A palace that required an army of invisible workers, a vision so expensive that saving it meant selling 2/3 of the land it sat on and opening the doors to strangers who paid $1 to stare at what remained. The man who built it died at 51, broken by an infected appendix, leaving a widow and a 13-year-old daughter to figure out how to keep the dream from collapsing. The widow made choices that would have horrified her husband. Sold the forests, fired half the staff, closed entire wings, and when that was not enough, did the unthinkable. Opened the front doors to paying crowds. Christmas, 1895, the house opened for family and friends. Christmas, 1930, it opened for anyone with $1. The transformation from private refuge to public attraction took 35 years. The question nobody asked in 1895 was whether beauty this expensive could survive. The answer came in pieces. Through federal taxes, through the Great Depression, through war, through decisions made by women who understood that sentiment does not pay coal bills. This is not a story about a beautiful house. This is a story about what happens when you build something so grand that keeping it alive becomes a full-time crisis. About the price of perfection, about who actually paid for it, and about whether anything this magnificent can ever truly belong to one family. The numbers are staggering. $5 million to build in 1895, $189 million in today's money. And that was just construction. Operating costs ran $250,000 a year in 1920, over $7 million today, every year, forever. Who paid for Biltmore? The workers who built it earned $1.50 a day, the stonemasons who carved the limestone, the carpenters who shaped 11 million bricks, the maids who cleaned 35 bedrooms for $8 a week, the foresters who replanted 125,000 acres, the widow who sold everything she could to keep the house standing, and eventually, you. Every tourist who walks through those doors, every wedding held in those rooms, every bottle of wine sold from the estate winery. Biltmore survives because it learned to eat admission fees instead of just family fortune. But before any of that, before the tourists and the war and the desperate choices, there was a young man with $13 million and a mountain, and an idea that seemed, at the time, perfectly reasonable. 1862, Staten Island, New York. George Washington Vanderbilt II is born into the kind of wealth that twists reality. His grandfather, Cornelius Vanderbilt, the Commodore, built a transportation empire starting with a single ferry, steamships, then railroads. By the time Cornelius died in 1877, he was worth roughly $100 million equivalent to $2.6 billion today, the richest American of his era. The money flowed to his son, William Henry Vanderbilt, George's father. William doubled it. When William died in 1885, he left approximately $200 million split among his children. George's share was $13 million, roughly $400 million in current dollars. He was 23 years old. George was the youngest of 8 children. His older brothers understood their role. They were Vanderbilts. They built palaces in Newport. They threw parties that cost $100,000 for a single evening. They raced yachts. They collected mistresses and scandal in equal measure. They performed wealth like theater. George performed nothing. He was slight, dark-haired, soft-spoken. Crowds made him uncomfortable. Small talk exhausted him. He preferred books to people, forests to ballrooms, silence to spectacle. By his early 20s, George spoke 8 languages fluently. He read philosophy in the original Greek, Latin, French, and German. His personal library eventually exceeded 24,000 volumes. He kept detailed logs of every book he read. At age 12, he started tracking titles. The last entry before his death, book number 3159, was Volume 3 of Henry Adams' History of the United States. He averaged 81 books a year for 39 years. His interests ran deep and specific: art history, horticulture, architecture, scientific forestry, still a new concept in America, agricultural reform. He traveled constantly, mostly through Europe, studying how great estates functioned: the Loire Chateau, English country houses, German forest management systems. He absorbed everything. His brothers built for show. George wanted something different. Not a summer cottage for parties, a real home, a working estate, a place where land and building functioned as a complete system. Beauty, yes, but also purpose. Farms that produced food, forests managed scientifically to yield timber without destruction, self-sufficiency at scale. The question was where? In 1888, George visited Asheville, North Carolina with his mother, Maria. The town sat in a valley ringed by the Blue Ridge Mountains. The air was clean and cool. The scenery was dramatic without being oppressive. The Southern Railway had extended service there recently, making it accessible without making it crowded. Asheville in 1888 was becoming a health resort. Wealthy Northerners came for the mountain air, believed to help tuberculosis and other respiratory ailments. Hotels were opening. The infrastructure was improving, but the surrounding land was damaged. Decades of careless logging had stripped the mountains. Farmers cleared steep slopes, planted corn and tobacco until the thin soil gave out, then abandoned the fields to erosion. The forest that remained was fragmented and exhausted. Streams ran muddy. Wildlife had thinned. George saw possibility. Damaged land could be restored. With enough acreage, scientific management, and sustained investment, this place could become what he envisioned: a model estate. Proof that stewardship and productivity could coexist. He began buying land quietly through agents to avoid inflating prices. Not a few hundred acres, not even a few thousand. He bought farms, logged over hillsides, abandoned fields, entire watersheds. The parcels accumulated, 125,000 acres eventually, nearly 200 square miles, larger than many European principalities, roughly the size of Chicago. The scale was necessary for George's vision. A small estate could not demonstrate proper forest management. It could not support diversified agriculture. It could not function as a self-sustaining system. To prove the concept, needed space to experiment, fail, adjust, and try again. The cost of land was relatively modest. Much of it was degraded and unwanted. Farmers were glad to sell and move elsewhere. By some estimates, George spent roughly $1 million acquiring the entire 125,000 acres, about $30 million today. A bargain for that much land, even damaged land. But land was just the foundation. The house itself, the farms, the forest restoration, the infrastructure would cost far more. George understood this. He was a Vanderbilt. Money, he believed, was not a constraint. His investment income from railroads, real estate, and industrial holdings was substantial and reliable. The annual returns could fund construction and ongoing operations indefinitely. That was the assumption. That assumption would prove catastrophically wrong. But in 1888, standing in the Blue Ridge Mountains with maps spread across a table, George felt only certainty. He knew what he wanted. He had the resources. He needed the right people to make it real. He turned to two men whose names would become permanently tied to Biltmore's story. The first was Richard Morris Hunt, America's greatest architect. Hunt was born in 1827. He studied at the École des Beaux-Arts in Paris, the first American to do so. He returned to practice in New York, designing mansions for the city's elite, the Breakers in Newport for George's brother Cornelius, the base of the Statue of Liberty, the Metropolitan Museum of Art's Great Hall. Hunt understood scale, proportion, and how to blend European tradition with American ambition. When George approached him in 1888, Hunt was 61 years old, at the peak of his career. He accepted the commission immediately. This would be his masterpiece. A chateau in the French Renaissance style, built in the American wilderness with American technology hidden inside European forms. The second hire was Frederick Law Olmsted, the landscape architect who designed Central Park. Olmsted was 66 in 1888. Career spanned decades and included landmark projects across the country. Central Park with Calvert Vaux, the grounds of the U.S. Capitol, Stanford University's campus, Niagara Falls Reservation, dozens of urban parks, cemeteries, and estates. Olmsted's philosophy was firm. Landscape is not decoration. It is a living, functioning system. Plants, water, topography, and human use must work together. The goal is not to conquer nature, but to reveal its potential through informed intervention. Beauty follows function, never the reverse. Hunt would design the house. Olmsted would heal the land and design the approach. George would fund it. Together they would create something America had never seen. A Gilded Age palace, yes, but also a working estate managed on scientific principles. A place that could support itself while demonstrating what responsible stewardship could achieve. The plan was ambitious. The plan was also expensive, very expensive, and the expense would never stop. That was the part nobody talked about in 1888, when everything felt possible and money felt infinite. The first step was to start building. And building at this scale meant creating an entire industrial operation in the mountains. 1889. Construction begins, not with hammers and nails, but with infrastructure. Biltmore sits on a plateau above the French Broad River, scenic, dramatic, and hopelessly remote. The nearest railroad stops in Asheville, 3 miles away. The roads between town and site are dirt tracks, steep and unreliable. Moving materials by wagon would be slow, expensive, and limited by weather. Hunt's solution is direct. Build a railroad. George funds a 3-mile spur from the Southern Railway line straight to the construction site. Crews lay track through 1889. Locomotives can now deliver limestone blocks, copper sheets, oak beams, bricks, glass, and equipment directly to the plateau. The spur costs roughly $77,000, about $2.4 million today, just to move materials. The site itself requires preparation. The plateau is uneven. Before Hunt's chateau can rise, the ground must be made ready. Excavation begins for the basement level, which will hold the estate's working organs: boilers, coal bins, laundries, kitchens, storerooms. The basement alone is vast, larger than most houses. Hunt designs everything with precision. The exterior will use Indiana limestone, a fine-grained stone that carves well and weathers gracefully. He needs massive quantities, blocks weighing hundreds of pounds each. Every piece must be quarried, numbered to his drawings, and shipped by rail to North Carolina. Many blocks arrive pre-carved: arched surrounds, decorative brackets, rosettes, carved details that will take months for stone workers to shape in Indiana quarries. The blocks travel by rail, get unloaded at the spur, then move by wagon the final distance to the construction site. George also needs bricks, millions of them. Transporting that many bricks would be prohibitively expensive, so George builds a brick kiln on site. The kiln produces 32,000 bricks per day at peak operation. Over the 6 years of construction, it fires millions of bricks for interior walls, chimneys, and structural support. He builds a woodworking mill on site. The mill turns raw timber into flooring, wall panels, trim, and custom joinery. Oak comes from local forests and from suppliers. Skilled carpenters shape it according to Hunt's specifications. The library alone will require hand-carved oak panels from floor to ceiling, custom bookcases, and a concealed spiral staircase to the upper gallery. At peak construction, more than 1,000 workers labor on the site, plus 60 stonemasons brought in for their specialized skills. The workforce is diverse. Stonemasons from Italy, who learned their craft in the Old Country, local carpenters from Asheville and the surrounding mountains, brickmakers, plasterers, metalworkers, glaziers who install the stained glass, electricians who thread the wiring for the then rare electric lights. For many local workers, Biltmore is the best job available. Steady pay, 6 days a week. The work is punishing. Stone dust burns lungs. Heights are unforgiving. Winters in the mountains are brutal. But wages are reliable. Common laborers earn about $1.50 per day. Skilled craftsmen, like stonemasons, earn $3 to $5 daily. Good money for the time and place. Temporary housing goes up for workers who cannot commute. Rough barracks, simple and functional. Others walk miles from Asheville each morning and back each evening. For 5 years, the site is a temporary town, a community held together by Vanderbilt money and a shared purpose. The foundation goes deep. Tons of earth excavated, stone laid in careful courses. The basement level begins to take shape. Massive spaces for boilers that will heat the entire house, servants' quarters, kitchens designed for feeding not just family, but staff. Industrial laundries with mechanized equipment, rare in the 1890s. Then, the walls begin to climb. Limestone block by limestone block. The Italian stonemasons set each piece methodically. Mortar mixed on site. Joints must be tight. Lines must be true. This building is meant to stand for centuries. Precision is not optional. Hunt's design is French Renaissance, drawing directly from Loire chateaux like Blois and Chenonceau. The facade is 780 feet long, 4 stories, steep slate roofs, corner towers. A porte-cochere provides sheltered arrival. Dormers, chimneys, turrets, every element calculated for proportion and visual rhythm. Inside, the plan guides visitors from grand public spaces to progressively more intimate areas. The entrance hall is designed to overwhelm. 3 stories of open space, barrel-vaulted ceiling, carved oak, stained glass, polished marble floors. The architecture stages astonishment deliberately. Beyond the entrance hall, the banquet hall, massive, 72 feet long, 42 feet wide, 70 feet high. A triple fireplace rises nearly to the ceiling, carved from limestone and oak. The ceiling is open to the rafters, exposing structural beams. The scale is baronial, medieval, a room designed to announce that you have entered something extraordinary. The library, George's favorite room, 2 stories, over 10,000 volumes when complete. The walls are covered floor to ceiling in carved walnut paneling. The ceiling features a painting brought from Venice, The Chariot of Aurora, by Giovanni Antonio Pellegrini, 64 feet by 32 feet, 13 separate canvases. The painting once adorned the Palazzo Pisani Moretta. George bought it and had it installed as the centerpiece of his library. A concealed spiral staircase allows access to the second-floor gallery. Black marble fireplace carved by Austrian artist Karl Bitter. This is not just a room for books. This is a room that announces books matter, that reading is not leisure, but vocation. The winter garden sits under a glass roof. Palms and tropical plants thrive there, even in Blue Ridge winters. A fountain provides sound and humidity. Marble floors, carved stone details, a space that brings the outside in, year-round. Bedrooms, number 35. Bathrooms, 43. Rare for 1895. Most American homes, even wealthy ones, had 1 or 2 bathrooms. Biltmore has 43. Hot and cold running water in every bathroom, porcelain fixtures, tile floors and walls. Central heating reaches every room via miles of pipe carrying hot water from basement boilers to radiators. Fireplaces, number 65. Stone, marble, carved oak mantels, some grand enough to walk into, others intimate and decorative. Each one custom designed for its room. The house will have electric lights throughout, still a luxury in 1890. Thomas Edison's electric light is barely a decade old. Most American homes use gas lamps or candles. Biltmore will have electric lights in major rooms, hallways, and even servants' areas. A generator sits in a separate building to reduce fire risk. Engineers design a bespoke electrical system because standards are still emerging. Call buttons are installed in principal rooms. Press a button, and a bell rings in the servants' areas, summoning staff. A mechanical system linking master and servant spaces invisibly. Elevators. Rare in private homes, Biltmore has them. Powered by electricity, allowing movement between floors without climbing stairs. Cutting-edge technology housed inside a building dressed like the 16th century. The roof is copper, thousands of sheets carefully seamed together. Copper is expensive but long-lasting. Over time, it will weather to that distinctive blue-green patina, durable, beautiful, chosen to endure for generations. While the house rises, George travels, constantly, to Europe, to the Orient, with Hunt or alone, buying furnishings, tapestries from the 15th and 16th centuries, carpets from Persia, paintings by Renoir, Whistler, Sargent, prints and engravings, furniture carved from rare woods, decorative objects spanning centuries, everything carefully selected, purchased, crated, and shipped to North Carolina. The furnishings budget is staggering. After spending $5 million on construction, George spends another estimated $1.5 million on artwork, furniture, rugs, tapestries, china, crystal, and silver. Over $40 million in today's money just for what fills the rooms. By 1894, the shell is complete. The roof is on, windows installed, exterior stonework finished. Inside, plasterers close walls, painters begin the slow work of coating every surface. Woodworkers install trim. Electricians test circuits. Plumbers pressure test the water system. Tile setters move from bathroom to bathroom. The house is nearly ready, but Hunt will not see it finished. Richard Morris Hunt dies in July 1895 at age 67. He spends his final years bringing George's vision to life. His supervising architect, Richard Sharp Smith, completes the remaining work according to Hunt's detailed plans. Christmas Eve, 1895, the target date. George wants the house ready to receive guests, his family, his friends, the people whose presence will christen Biltmore and make it real. The staff works around the clock in the final weeks. Furniture delivered and placed. Art hung, books shelved, linens prepared, fires lit in fireplaces to test chimneys and warm the rooms. The electric lights tested room by room. The elevators tested. The heating system brought online, coal burning in the basement boilers, hot water circulating through miles of pipe. December 24, 1895. Snow falls in the Blue Ridge. The house glows with electric light. Fires burn in the hearths. Garlands dress the public rooms. The table in the banquet hall is set for dozens of guests. George's family and friends arrive by train in Asheville, then travel by carriage up the winding 3-mile approach road that Olmsted designed to build anticipation. Glimpses of the house through trees, then the full facade revealed all at once as carriages round the final curve. They step down beneath the porte-cochere, enter the hall, and encounter something unlike anything else in America. A palace in the wilderness, built by a man who wanted quiet but created a monument impossible to ignore. The numbers at completion: 175,000 square feet of floor space, 4 acres under one roof, 35 bedrooms, 43 bathrooms, 65 fireplaces, 11 million bricks. A stone spiral staircase with 102 steps rising 4 floors, with a wrought iron chandelier holding 72 electric light bulbs hanging through its center. Cost? $5 million for construction, roughly $189 million today, plus another $1.5 million for furnishings and art. That is what it cost to build. What it would cost to operate, to keep alive year after year, was a different calculation entirely, one that George was only beginning to understand as the first guests walked through his glowing rooms on Christmas Eve. Christmas morning, 1895. Guests wake in their rooms. Fires already burn in the fireplaces. Hot water flows from the taps. Breakfast appears exactly when expected. Coffee stays hot. Rooms stay immaculate. None of this happens by itself. Behind the beauty, an army, staff numbering over 100 at peak operation. More during the social season when guests fill the bedrooms and George hosts dinners. The division of labor is precise. Upstairs, the family and guests occupy the showpiece rooms. Downstairs, below ground, the staff operates the machine that keeps the house functioning. The basement is a different world. Long corridors painted institutional green, lit by bare bulbs. Servants' quarters, servants' dining room. Kitchens laid out not for a family, but for an operation capable of feeding dozens. The boiler room sits at the heart of the basement. 2 massive boilers, each several stories tall, coal-fired, feeding the hot water system that heats the entire house. Boiler operators work in shifts around the clock, loading coal, monitoring pressure and temperature, draining condensate. The boilers never fully shut down in winter. The house is too large to let go cold and reheat efficiently. Coal arrives by the carload on the rail spur, tons delivered regularly, unloaded, stored, shoveled into the boilers daily. Just heating Biltmore through a Blue Ridge winter consumes hundreds of tons of coal. The fuel bill alone runs thousands of dollars annually. The laundry is industrial scale, mechanized washers and dryers. Servants handle mountains of linens, sheets from 35 bedrooms changed regularly, tablecloths, napkins, towels from 43 bathrooms, clothing for family and guests, work uniforms for staff. The laundry runs continuously. Kitchens are tiered. The main kitchen prepares meals for family and guests. A separate kitchen feeds the staff. Cooks, sous cooks, kitchen maids, scullery workers. Meals arrive upstairs via dumbwaiters and service staircases. Food is cooked below, plated, then sent up at precise times. Hot food must arrive hot, cold dishes cold. Timing is critical. Provisions are purchased in bulk or produced on the estate. The dairy supplies milk, butter, and cheese. Gardens and glasshouses yield vegetables year-round. Orchards provide fruit. Hogs and chickens supply meat and eggs. Much is grown or raised locally, cutting dependence on outside suppliers. But specialty items, spices, imported goods, still arrive by rail and cost money. Storerooms hold china, crystal, and silver. Formal place settings for dozens. Extra service pieces, candelabras, serving trays, everything inventoried and maintained. A full-time job tracking and polishing. Staff quarters are simple. Small rooms in the basement and attic areas. Narrow beds, minimal privacy, far from the luxury of the guest bedrooms upstairs. The contrast is absolute. Gilded ceilings above, plain walls below. Roles are strictly defined. The household manager oversees operations. Housekeeper supervises maids and coordinates cleaning. The butler manages footmen and dining service. The head cook runs the kitchens. Maids clean. Endlessly. 175,000 square feet demands constant attention. Dusting carved wood, polishing brass and silver, washing windows, changing linens, sweeping and mopping marble floors, maintaining the finish on furniture. A single room like the library requires hours of work. Multiply that by 250 rooms. Maids earn roughly $8 per week in the late 1890s. They work 6 days. 10 to 12-hour days are common. They move through rooms filled with objects worth more than their annual wages. They dust furniture costing what their families pay in rent for a year. The disparity is unspoken, but inescapable. Footmen answer call buttons. When a guest presses a button, a bell rings in the service areas. A footman responds, ascending via the narrow service staircases hidden from view. "What can I bring you? More wood for the fire? Tea? Writing paper?" They fulfill requests invisibly and return to the service areas to await the next summons. The chauffeurs live above the stables. Initially, they manage horses and carriages. George is an early adopter of automobiles. By 1900, motor cars appear on the estate. The chauffeurs learn to drive and maintain them. The garage replaces the carriage house. But the role remains. Transport when needed, maintenance always. Groundskeepers and gardeners number in the dozens. The formal gardens near the house demand daily attention. Planting, weeding, pruning, watering, seasonal displays. The approach road must be maintained. Grass cut, trees trimmed, leaves raked, gravel smoothed. In a place this large, grounds work never ends. Foresters manage the 125,000 acres. Initially under Gifford Pinchot, then Carl Schenck. Scientific forestry requires labor. Marking trees for selective harvest, planting seedlings, building fire breaks, conducting controlled burns, cutting and maintaining trails and access roads, surveying and mapping forest compartments. The work is physical and constant. Every worker draws wages every week. Staff payroll runs thousands of dollars monthly. Some workers live on the estate in provided housing. Others live in Asheville or nearby and commute. George builds Biltmore Village, a model community near the gates to house workers and provide services. Brick and stucco cottages, a church, a school, a hospital, shops, all designed by Richard Sharp Smith in an English cottage style. The village becomes a small town unto itself. George's labor policy is paternalistic, but, for the era, progressive. Wages arrive reliably. Housing is maintained. The school educates workers' children without charge. Medical care is available at the estate hospital. George pays all expenses for the Cathedral of All Souls, the Episcopal church he builds across from the main gate, so its weekly collections can go directly to charity rather than operating costs. Every Christmas, George hosts a party for workers' children, a decorated tree, presents for each child. Even children who cannot attend receive gifts delivered to their homes. For a Gilded Age employer, this is unusual. Many industrialists view workers as interchangeable. George sees them as essential to his vision and treats them accordingly, within the paternalistic framework of his time. The system functions because roles are clear and expectations firm. Staff work hard. They are paid fairly for the era. The alternative, working in factories or farms, often offers worse conditions and lower wages. For many families, Biltmore employment represents stability. But the truth remains visible in the architecture itself. 2 circulation systems, grand staircases with bronze railings and stained glass for family and guests, narrow service stairs, steep and plain for staff. The staff move through the house unseen, so fires are always lit, water always hot, meals always ready when wanted. Invisibility is the goal. The house must appear to function effortlessly, magic sustained by hidden labor. George himself is a quiet presence. He does not demand spectacle. He reads in the library. He walks the grounds with Olmsted, discussing plantings and forest management. He corresponds with scholars and book dealers. His lifestyle is restrained compared to his siblings' Newport excess, but restraint still requires support. Even George reading alone in the library means someone tended the fire, someone dusted the books, someone maintained the room's temperature via the heating system, someone prepared his meals, someone laundered his clothes. One man reading appears simple. That simplicity requires an army. The cost of this army is substantial and ongoing. Wages, housing, food, coal, provisions, equipment, maintenance. Every month, money moves from George's accounts to cover operations. The estate's productive arms, dairy, farms, orchards, forests, generate revenue, but not enough to cover the full burden. The difference comes from George's investment income, railroads, real estate, industrial holdings. The Vanderbilt fortune, carefully managed, produces returns. Those returns pay for Biltmore's operations. As long as the income continues and the costs remain stable, the balance holds. George believes it will hold. He has resources. He manages carefully. He avoids waste. The estate is expensive, yes, but it is also productive. Over time, he expects the productive capacity to grow and shoulder more of the cost. He does not foresee 2 catastrophic shifts, one fiscal, imposed by federal law, one personal, delivered by an inflamed appendix. Together, they will shatter the balance and force choices George never imagined. The house is finished. The rooms glow. Guests come and go. But George's real ambition lies beyond the walls, in the damaged forest that covers 125,000 acres. In 1890, American forestry as a profession barely exists. Europe, especially Germany, has practiced scientific forest management for generations. Schools, trained specialists, tested methods. America has loggers. The difference is fundamental. Logging extracts and moves on. Forestry manages for the long term. George wants to prove that American forests can be managed scientifically, that damaged land can be restored, that timber production and ecological health can coexist. To do that, he needs someone trained in European methods, but willing to work in the American wilderness. Frederick Law Olmsted recommends Gifford Pinchot. Pinchot is 26 years old in 1892 when George hires him. Born to wealth in Connecticut, educated at Yale, then a year studying forestry in Europe, where he absorbs German techniques and philosophy. He returns to America, eager to apply what he learned. No one else is doing this work. Pinchot sees an opportunity to shape an entire profession. Biltmore offers the perfect laboratory. 125,000 acres, diverse terrain, badly damaged but not destroyed, room to experiment, funding to support the work, and an employer who genuinely believes in the mission. Pinchot begins with a survey. What species are present? Where are healthy stands? Where is natural regeneration happening? Which areas are most degraded? Crews walk the forest, tract by tract, marking trees, recording measurements, noting conditions. The survey takes months. The picture that emerges is grim. Decades of careless logging took the best trees and left slashed to rot or burn. Farmers cleared steep slopes for crops that exhausted thin mountain soils, then abandoned the fields. Erosion carved gullies down hillsides. Streams ran turbid after every rain. American chestnut, once a dominant species valuable for timber and wildlife, was fragmented. Pinchot's approach is systematic. First, stop the bleeding. Introduce selective cutting instead of clear cutting. Harvest mature trees ready for market, but leave younger growth to fill the canopy. This maintains forest cover, reduces erosion, and protects future yields. Second, lay out fire breaks to prevent wildfires from racing unchecked across thousands of acres. Fire is inevitable in these mountains. Controlled fire can be useful, clearing ladder fuels and stimulating certain species. Uncontrolled fire destroys everything. Third, begin reforestation in the worst areas, planting thousands of seedlings by hand, white pine, yellow poplar, oak, species chosen for local fitness and commercial value. The work is labor-intensive. Crews dig, plant, water, protect young trees from deer and weather. Fourth, build infrastructure. Roads and trails to reach remote compartments, allow access for management and fire control. Cut strategically to minimize erosion. Pinchot keeps meticulous records. What works? What fails? Why? The Biltmore Forest becomes a living textbook. The program is practical, not romantic. Pinchot is not preserving wilderness. He is demonstrating that forests can be productive and sustainable simultaneously. Timber can be harvested, revenue can be generated, and the forest can remain healthy, even improve, with proper management. The work yields results. Erosion slows as ground cover returns. Reforestation plots from the early 1890s grow into sound, young stands. Wildlife creeps back. Selective logging provides steady income to local mills. Not spectacular income, but consistent. More importantly, the forest is healing, visibly. Anyone who knew these mountains in the 1880s can see the difference by 1900. Streams run clearer, hillsides green up. The transformation is gradual but undeniable. Pinchot's tenure at Biltmore is brief but influential. By 1895, he accepts a federal post. He will eventually become the first chief of the United States Forest Service. The techniques he refines at Biltmore, selective harvesting, sustained yield forestry, reforestation, become national policy. George replaces Pinchot with Carl Schenk, a German forester with both academic training and field experience. Schenk continues the program and expands it. In 1898, Schenk founds the Biltmore Forest School, the first forestry school in America. Students live on the estate. They learn by doing, marking trees for harvest, calculating timber volumes, laying out roads, conducting prescribed burns, studying soils, diagnosing tree diseases, building timber frame structures, surveying, and mapping. The curriculum is practical. European forestry schools emphasize classroom theory. Schenk believes American forestry must be learned in American forests, on the ground, hands dirty. The school combines lectures with fieldwork in a ratio heavily favoring fieldwork. The Biltmore Forest School runs from 1898 to 1913. Over 15 years, it trains roughly 350 students. These graduates carry scientific forestry across America. Some enter state and federal agencies. Others manage private timberlands. They spread the gospel. Forests can be productive and sustainable. Exploitation is not the only model. The school's influence extends far beyond its enrollment. It establishes forestry as a legitimate profession in America. It demonstrates that forest management requires specialized knowledge, not just experience with an axe. It provides a model for other forestry programs that follow. This is arguably George Vanderbilt's most consequential achievement. Not the house, though that is spectacular, but the forest. The proof that damaged American landscapes can be restored through science and patience. That timber production and ecological health are compatible. That stewardship beats extraction over time. The house dazzles visitors. The forest changes an industry. But both house and forest demand funding. Constant funding. And that funding hinges on George's ability to pay. The estate's productive arms, dairy, farms, timber sales, generate revenue, but nowhere near enough to cover operating costs and capital improvements. The difference still comes from investment income. The Vanderbilt fortune remains large, but it is not infinite, and external forces are about to shrink it significantly. 1898. George marries Edith Stuyvesant Dresser in Paris. She is 25. He is 36. Edith is descended from Peter Stuyvesant, the first governor of Dutch colonial New York. Cultured, intelligent, socially adept where George is awkward. They honeymoon in Italy for 4 months. When they return to Biltmore, crowds line the streets of Asheville to cheer their arrival. Edith adapts quickly to managing the estate. She oversees household operations, works with the housekeeper on staffing, menus, and guest arrangements. She establishes the Biltmore School of Domestic Science, training young women in household management. She organizes an annual agricultural fair on the estate. She supports George's philanthropic work. August 22, 1900. Cornelia Stuyvesant Vanderbilt is born in the Louis XV room at Biltmore. The birth is a celebrity event. Newspapers cover it. The first child born at Biltmore, the heir. George's life settles into a pattern. Winters at Biltmore, summers traveling or at other properties. Quiet entertaining, small dinner parties, weekend guests, nothing like Newport extravagance. George's temperament and budget both favor restraint. The estate functions. Staff keep the house running. Farms produce. The dairy thrives, becoming one of North Carolina's largest. The forest management program continues under Schenk. Revenue flows in from timber sales, dairy products, and surplus agricultural goods sold locally. But the balance is delicate. Monthly operating costs remain heavy. Coal, salaries, provisions, maintenance, repairs that never end. Every fix requires skilled labor and materials. George covers the deficit from investment income. The margin is tighter than he would like, but it works. Then, 1913. The 16th Amendment is ratified. Federal income tax becomes law. Until 1913, wealthy Americans paid almost no direct tax to the federal government. State and local property taxes existed, but income went largely untaxed. The ground on which the Vanderbilt fortune had been built and grown. The new income tax changes the arithmetic immediately. Rates start modest, but climb quickly for high earners. George's substantial annual income, the money that funds Biltmore's operations, now flows partially to Washington. The effect is direct. Each year, tens of thousands of dollars that previously covered coal, salaries, and repairs now go to federal taxes. Operating costs do not fall. The house still requires heating, staff, and constant maintenance, but available funds shrink. George studies the ledgers. Cuts are necessary. Where? Every department feels essential. Dismissing staff cripples operations. Closing rooms undermines the estate's purpose. Reducing farm or forest work lowers the revenue that helps offset costs. He begins trimming. Travel curtailed. New purchases deferred. Non-critical maintenance postponed. Vacant staff positions not always refilled. The adjustments are incremental, designed to preserve core function while reducing outflow. George believes he can adapt. The tax is permanent, but the estate can adjust. Productivity can increase. Expenses can be controlled. With discipline and time, a new equilibrium might emerge. Time runs out. March 1914. George travels to Washington, D.C. for medical consultations. He has been struggling with health issues, abdominal pain, appendicitis by most accounts. The condition worsens suddenly. Surgeons operate an emergency on March 6, 1914. George Washington Vanderbilt II dies on the operating table. He is 51 years old. The news reaches Biltmore by telegram. Edith receives it alone. George is dead. Cornelia, their only child, is 13 years old. And Edith has inherited a magnificent estate that burns money faster than it generates revenue. George's will leaves Biltmore to Edith for her lifetime, then to Cornelia. The bequest includes all assets, house, land, farms, forests, and all obligations. Edith sits at George's desk in the library and examines the numbers. Her husband left behind. The picture is sobering. Monthly operating costs hover around $20,000, roughly $600,000 in today's currency. Annual costs exceed $250,000, over $7 million today. Farm and timber revenues cover perhaps one-third. The remainder depends on investment income from George's estate. That income still exists. George left a substantial fortune, but federal income taxes reduce what is available. Estate settlement costs take another bite. Legal fees, taxes on the inheritance itself, the money flowing to Biltmore shrinks while costs remain fixed. Edith commissions accountants to project the future. Their findings are blunt. At the current pace, the estate will exhaust capital within a decade, perhaps sooner. Once funds run dry, creditors and tax collectors will move in. The estate will be seized and auctioned. Edith faces a choice. She can try to operate exactly as George envisioned, likely ending in bankruptcy and forced sale within a few years. Or she can make hard decisions immediately, while options remain to save what can be saved. She is 41 years old, a widow with a teenage daughter, and an estate employing hundreds of people. The weight is immense. Many advisors urge her to liquidate everything, sell the house, the land, the furnishings, take the money and live comfortably elsewhere, close the chapter. Edith refuses. Biltmore is more than a house. It is George's life's work. It supports hundreds of families. The forest restoration is nationally significant. The estate has value beyond dollars. But sentiment will not keep the boilers firing or staff paid. She begins planning. The hard math of survival. Edith's strategy is surgical. Identify what is essential. Identify what is negotiable. Cut the negotiable to save the essential. The house and its immediate grounds are essential. The irreplaceable core of George's vision. The forest holdings, while important, are negotiable if selling them generates capital to secure the core. In 1915, Edith opens discussions with the United States Forest Service. The service, newly established and once led by Gifford Pinchot, seeks large tracts for national forests. The land George assembled and managed scientifically is exactly what the government wants. Contiguous acreage, proven potential for sustainable management, strategic location in the southern Appalachians. Negotiations take time. Boundaries must be surveyed, values appraised, terms debated, congressional appropriations secured, politics navigated. The process stretches into 1916. The sale closes that year. Approximately 86,700 acres, nearly 70% of the original estate, transfer to federal ownership. The government pays roughly $5 per acre. Total, about $433,500, equivalent to roughly $12 million today. Far less than George invested in acquisition and improvements, but a fair market price for mountain timberland in 1916. The transaction forms the core of what becomes Pisgah National Forest, named for Mount Pisgah, visible from Biltmore's terraces. The sale achieves multiple goals for Edith. It generates capital to retire debts and build a financial cushion. It ensures George's forestry work continues under federal stewardship. And it reduces the estate's footprint to a manageable size. Edith retains roughly 8,000 acres around the house and village, still substantial but no longer overwhelming. She can concentrate resources on the core without the crushing expense of administering tens of thousands of acres of forest. The Biltmore Forest School closes. Carl Schenck returns to Germany, but the principles Pinchot and Schenck taught, selective harvesting, sustained yield, reforestation, are now embedded in federal policy and spreading across American forests. Next, Edith cuts operations. Headcount falls gradually through attrition and targeted layoffs. She tries to soften the impact. Severance, where feasible, letters of reference, assistants finding other work. The reductions are necessary, but not cruel. Household staff shrink from over 100 to roughly 60. Still large, but sustainable. Departments consolidate. Roles combine. Work intensifies for those who remain, but the payroll becomes manageable. Maintenance is triaged. Essential systems, heating, electricity, plumbing, go to the front of the line. Cosmetic work waits. Unused wings are closed off. Vents shut to save coal. Heat concentrated in occupied areas. Formal gardens are simplified, reducing labor and material inputs. Edith cuts her own spending drastically. Guest lists narrow. Entertaining becomes rare. Travel drops to near zero. She focuses on Cornelia's education and on keeping the estate solvent. Her method is calm and unsentimental. She keeps detailed ledgers, reviews accounts monthly, questions every expense. Can this wait? Can we do without? Is there a cheaper alternative? She becomes expert in the mechanics of survival. The goal is no longer restoring George's full vision. That is financially impossible. The goal is lean continuity, a smaller operation that lives within its means. Through the late 1910s and 1920s, the strategy holds. The estate stabilizes. Bills are paid. Staff receive wages on time. The house is maintained, if not lavishly. Essential repairs are completed. Deferred maintenance accumulates in less critical areas, but stays manageable. Cornelia grows up. In 1924, she marries John Francis Amherst Cecil, a British diplomat descended from William Cecil, 1st Baron Burleigh. The wedding is held at All Souls Cathedral, across from the estate's main gate. Edith walks her daughter down the aisle. The event brings the Vanderbilt family together one more time. It is one of the last grand occasions at Biltmore before the next crisis. Edith remarries in 1925 to Peter Golett Gary, a U.S. Senator from Rhode Island. She moves away from Biltmore, leaving operations to Cornelia and John Cecil. Cornelia gives birth to 2 sons, George Henry Vanderbilt Cecil in 1925, born in the same Louis XV room where Cornelia herself was born. William Amherst Vanderbilt Cecil in 1928, also born in that room. The estate passes to a new generation. Cornelia and John take control. They inherit an estate Edith has stabilized but not secured. The margin is thin. Any shock, economic downturn, major repair could tip the balance back toward crisis. The shock arrives in October 1929. The stock market collapses. The Great Depression begins. October 1929. Stock values evaporate. Banks fail. Businesses close. Unemployment soars. An economy that felt prosperous through the 1920s reveals its fragility. Fortunes vanish. Biltmore is not immune. The investments that generate operating income lose value. Dividends thin or stop. The cash flow Cornelia and John rely on for wages, coal, and repairs turns uncertain. Asheville, booming through the 1920s as automobile tourism grew, collapses almost overnight. Hotels stand empty. Restaurants close. Shops struggle. Unemployment in western North Carolina climbs above 20%. Vacations are luxuries no one can afford. Cornelia and John face grim arithmetic. Income has fallen. Expenses remain substantial. The dairy and farms produce revenue, but nowhere near enough to close the gap. Further cuts are possible. Dismiss more staff. Darken more rooms. Defer all but emergency maintenance. But there is a floor. Below that floor, the house itself begins to fail. Stone structures demand care. Neglect invites water. Water breeds rot and decay. Plaster loosens. Foundations shift. Small problems become structural. A few underfunded years can require decades and millions to reverse. Selling is considered. Brokers propose breaking up the remaining land for development. But who buys real estate during a depression? And even if parcels sell, what happens to the house? Too large, too expensive to operate, impractical for anyone but the family George intended it for. Then someone, the record is unclear who, suggests opening Biltmore to paying visitors. For Cornelia's class and generation, the idea is scandalous. Privacy is sacred. Home is sanctuary. The thought of strangers walking through your rooms, studying your possessions, staring at your family's life feels degrading. But Cornelia is practical. Her grandmother Edith already sold 2/3 of George's land, cut half the staff, closed wings. What is left to protect except pride? And pride does not pay bills. There is also civic duty. Asheville is desperate. Tourism is the region's economic engine. Biltmore could draw visitors. Those travelers would need hotels, meals, and services. The estate itself would hire guides, ticket takers, groundskeepers. At a moment of near universal unemployment, Biltmore could put people back to work. The city of Asheville formally requests that Cornelia and John open the estate to boost tourism. The request provides political cover. This is not greed or exhibitionism. This is community service. They decide. Biltmore will open in March 1930. Preparations are substantial but frugal. Rooms are arranged for viewing. Ropes and barriers guide visitors and protect furnishings. Routes are mapped to control flow and prevent congestion. Staff are trained to manage crowds and answer questions. Tickets are printed. Admission is set at $1, roughly $18 in today's money. High enough to generate revenue, low enough to be accessible during hard times. The tour covers principal: public rooms, entrance hall, banquet hall, library, winter garden, selected bedrooms. Private family quarters remain closed. Guests enter at the front, follow a prescribed circuit, and exit at the side. The route is designed for approximately 2 hours. Advertising is modest. Notices in regional newspapers, word of mouth. The marketing budget is minimal. They cannot afford much and do not need much. Biltmore's reputation precedes it. Opening day, March 1930. Uncertainty runs high. Will anyone come? Will people in a depression spend $1 to tour a rich man's house? Will the experience feel inspiring or voyeuristic? Attendance exceeds expectations. Visitors arrive from Asheville and surrounding towns. Some walk, others come by car, a few by wagon. They pay their $1 and step inside. They enter the hall and look up at stone rising 3 stories. They stand in the banquet hall beneath the triple fireplace and the 70-foot ceiling. They linger in the library among 10,000 books. They study paintings, tapestries, furniture, and carved details. Reactions vary. Some come from curiosity, some because they worked on the estate or know people who did. Some for hope, to be reminded that beauty and craft still exist in a world that feels broken. Revenue is modest but meaningful. More importantly, the model works. Biltmore has found a purpose beyond private residence. It is now a museum, a cultural attraction, a historical landmark. The house that George built for solitude now sustains itself by accepting crowds. The transformation is complete. Privacy traded for survival. Through the 1930s, tourism carries Biltmore. Visitor numbers rise and fall with the economy. In the worst Depression years, attendance thins. As conditions improve in the late 1930s, more people come. The estate stabilizes without prospering. Cornelia and John balance maintenance against ticket income, aware that one bad season could trigger crisis. Then, December 7th, 1941. Pearl Harbor, America enters World War II. Tourism halts almost at once. Gasoline is rationed, rubber is scarce. Civilian automobile travel for leisure becomes difficult, then nearly impossible. Young men leave for service. Families focus on survival, not vacation. The visitors who carried Biltmore through the Depression vanish. Cornelia and John face another cliff. No income, fixed costs. How long can they hold? Then an unexpected call from Washington, from the National Gallery of Art, and a proposal that will turn Biltmore into something George never imagined: a vault, guarding treasures against war. David Finley is the director of the National Gallery of Art. Appointed when the museum opened in 1941, he immediately confronts a terrifying question. What if Washington is attacked? German U-boats patrol the Atlantic coast. Some venture close to American shores. Air raids on major cities feel plausible. The National Gallery holds irreplaceable works. Paintings and sculptures worth millions. Cultural treasures that cannot be replaced if destroyed. Finley needs a secure location far from Washington. Remote, structurally sound, climate-controlled, isolated, discreet. He thinks of his friend, Edith Vanderbilt. He stayed at Biltmore in the 1920s. He knows the house, built of brick and steel with limestone veneer, largely fireproof. deep in the mountains, far from coasts and industrial targets. Massive rooms with high ceilings. George's heating system can regulate temperature and humidity. The estate is private, gated, reachable by limited roads that are easy to monitor. Finley contacts Edith in late 1941, shortly after Pearl Harbor. Can Biltmore house the gallery's most important works? Edith no longer lives at the estate full-time, but she still has authority. She agrees without hesitation. Biltmore will serve. The operation begins immediately. Finley and his curators select 62 paintings and 17 sculptures, the highlights of the collection, works every art student studies. Rembrandt's self-portrait, 1659, Raphael's Alba Madonna, Gilbert Stuart's iconic George Washington portrait, the image on the $1 bill, works by Vermeer, Van Dyck, Titian, Goya, pieces spanning centuries, millions of dollars of cultural value. The chosen location at Biltmore is the music room on the first floor. Oddly, the room was never finished. Rough pine subfloors, unadorned brick walls. For reasons unclear, George left it incomplete. Now that rawness makes it ideal. No finished surfaces to damage. Room for modifications. Workers retrofit the space quickly. Steel doors installed in the archways, steel bars on windows, vertical steel racks built to hang paintings safely. Heavy drapes hung over the steel doors to conceal them. From outside the room, nothing appears unusual. The drapes look decorative. Behind them, a vault. January 1942. A snowstorm blankets the Blue Ridge. Late at night, a train departs Washington carrying the crated artworks. Armed guards escort the cargo. The train rolls south through darkness. It arrives in Asheville in the early morning. Trucks meet it. The crates are loaded carefully. Then the nervous climb up the approach road. Icy, hilly, curvy. Finley rides with the trucks, sweating despite the cold. He envisions Raphael crashing down a mountain. Every piece arrives intact. The crates are carried into the music room, unpacked, paintings hung on the steel racks, sculptures placed in the servants' dining room nearby. Armed guards take up posts. 24-hour watch. The guards dress in civilian clothes to avoid drawing attention. Biltmore remains open to paying visitors through 1942, 1943, and into 1944. Tourists walk through the house. They pass within feet of the music room. They see closed doors with drapes. They do not know what sits behind those doors. Staff are told something important is stored. Do not discuss it. Security is tight, but discreet. Federal guards patrol. Temperature and humidity are monitored constantly. National Gallery curators visit periodically to inspect conditions. The arrangement provides multiple benefits for Cornelia and John. The government pays rent. Not a fortune, but reliable income while tourism has ceased. Federal guards secure the entire estate at no cost, and the partnership affirms Biltmore's national importance. The house is not merely a relic of Gilded Age excess, it is a trusted guardian of culture in crisis. The war in Europe ends May 1945. The war in the Pacific ends August 1945. As peace returns, the National Gallery begins retrieval. Crates are brought out, paintings carefully packed, sculptures wrapped. Trucks return them to Washington in October 1944, well before the war officially ends, but after the immediate threat has passed. Every piece survives the war unscathed. Gilbert Stuart's Washington, Rembrandt's self-portrait, Raphael's Madonna, all safe. Biltmore proved its worth not just as home or attraction, but as protector. The music room is emptied, the steel racks removed, the steel doors taken down. The room returned to its unfinished state, waiting for whatever comes next. For Cornelia and John, the war years confirmed something crucial. Biltmore can serve. If it can serve, it has value beyond family nostalgia. If it has value, it deserves to endure. The question is, how to secure that endurance permanently? Tourism resumes slowly after 1945. Automobile travel returns as rationing ends. The middle class grows. Highways improve. By the 1950s, Americans are traveling for leisure again. Biltmore draws steady crowds. But Cornelia is unhappy. She wants more from life than managing an estate. Her marriage to John Cecil deteriorates. They divorce in 1934. Cornelia leaves Biltmore and never returns. She pursues an independent life as an artist and writer in New York and abroad. John Cecil stays at Biltmore with their 2 sons. He manages operations with help from Edith until his death in 1954. Their son, George Henry Vanderbilt Cecil, occupies rooms in the house until 1956. At that point, Biltmore House ceases to be a family residence. It becomes fully a historic house museum. William Amherst Vanderbilt Cecil, the younger son, returns from his banking career in New York in the late 1950s to help his brother manage the estate's financial troubles. They worked together to stabilize and grow the operation George Vanderbilt envisioned decades earlier. William Cecil eventually inherits the estate when Cornelia dies in 1976. Under William Cecil's leadership, Biltmore transforms from struggling historic house to thriving enterprise. But that transformation requires clear-eyed business thinking and willingness to adapt George's vision to modern reality. William Cecil returns to Biltmore in 1960 with his wife, Mary Mimi Ryan, a Wall Street lawyer. They face an estate that is solvent but fragile. Tourism generates revenue, but not enough for major capital projects. Deferred maintenance accumulates. The estate exists in perpetual financial tension. William understands what many historic estate owners resist. Sentiment cannot fund preservation. If Biltmore is to survive another century, it must operate as a business, not a family home that tolerates visitors, a professional cultural enterprise. In 1963, Biltmore is designated a National Historic Landmark. Formal recognition of its architectural and historical significance. Prestige that comes with obligation. The house cannot be allowed to decay. Its preservation matters nationally. William begins professionalizing operations through the 1960s and 1970s. Tourism is expanded and refined. Visitor facilities improve. Parking, restrooms, gift shops, food service. Marketing becomes strategic. Advertising targets demographics likely to visit. Partnerships with travel agencies and tour operators bring groups. The estate begins hosting events, weddings, corporate conferences, seasonal festivals. Christmas at Biltmore becomes a major draw, with the house decorated floor to ceiling. These events require careful management. More visitors mean more wear on historic surfaces. Every body adds moisture and tracks dirt. The task is maximizing income while minimizing damage. In 1985, William opens the Biltmore Estate Winery. The estate's location and climate suit viticulture. Grapes are grown on site. Wine is produced in converted dairy barns. The winery adds both revenue stream and reason to visit. Tourists come for the house, stay for wine tasting, buy bottles to take home. The winery becomes one of the most visited in America. Farm production continues. Agricultural surplus is sold through estate shops and restaurants. The farm-to-table concept George pioneered in the 1890s is modernized and marketed. Visitors can see where food comes from and buy products directly. Expansion demands reinvestment. Revenue must flow back into preservation and improvements. William treats Biltmore as an ongoing capital project. There is no end point, only continuous work. Preservation becomes systematic. Sections of the copper roof, now over a century old, require repair or replacement, matching materials and techniques to original construction. Limestone facade needs cleaning and conservation. Pollution and weather have softened carved details. Stone conservators stabilize and restore. Interior oak needs refinishing. Plaster demands constant patching. Electrical and plumbing systems from the 1890s must be upgraded discreetly. Modern safety and reliability while retaining historic character. The work is painstaking. Specialized craftspeople, stone carvers, plasterers, metalworkers, conservators must be recruited or trained. Materials must match originals. Every project begins with research, moves through planning, and ends under quality control. Preservation is not a campaign with an endpoint. It is permanent responsibility. Modern technology is threaded in carefully. Climate control improves to protect furnishings and art while reducing energy use. Fire suppression upgrades. Security systems add cameras and alarms unobtrusively. Solar panels on outbuildings, screened from historic views, help reduce operating costs. The forestry legacy continues. Remaining woodlands, roughly 8,000 acres, are managed sustainably. Timber income balanced with ecological health. Reforestation and habitat work persist. The principles Pinchot and Schenck established prove durable a century later. By the early 21st century, Biltmore draws over 1 million visitors annually. The estate employs approximately 2,400 people, far more than George's original staff of 100 plus. Biltmore stands among Western North Carolina's largest private employers. The economic impact across the region is substantial. Additional accommodations open. The Inn on Biltmore Estate in 2001, a Forbes 4-star hotel. Village Hotel on Biltmore Estate in 2015. Cottages on Biltmore Estate for overnight guests. Multiple restaurants, event venues, meeting facilities. A licensed products division selling Biltmore branded goods. The transformation is complete. Biltmore began as one man's private refuge, realized with Gilded Age capital and vision. It survived through adaptation, Edith's hard choices, Cornelia's willingness to share what had been private, William Cecil's recognition that preservation requires business discipline, public access, and diversified income. The house George built for solitude now serves over 1 million visitors annually. The forest he restored for scientific demonstration now welcomes hikers and naturalists. The estate that once strained a fortune now generates revenue sufficient to sustain itself and employ thousands. This is the lesson. Beauty alone is not enough. Grand visions require resources. Resources without adaptation guarantee failure. Biltmore endured because its stewards were willing to change its purpose while protecting its essence. Who paid for Biltmore? George Washington Vanderbilt II paid $5 million to build it, equivalent to $189 million today, plus another $1.5 million for furnishings and art. He paid $1 million for 125,000 acres of land. He paid operating costs of roughly $250,000 annually, over $7 million in current dollars, for the years he owned it. The workers paid. Over 1,000 laborers and 60 stonemasons who spent 6 years raising the house. Common workers earning $1.50 a day, stonemasons making $3 to $5 daily. The maids who cleaned 35 bedrooms for $8 a week. The chauffeurs, cooks, groundskeepers, and foresters who kept the estate running. They paid in labor, in invisible service, in wages that were fair for the time, but a fraction of what the house consumed. Edith Vanderbilt paid. She sold 86,700 acres to the federal government for $433,500, far less than George invested. She cut staff in half, closed wings, simplified operations, managed accounts with unsentimental discipline for decades. She paid. In choices that would have pained her husband. Cornelia and John Cecil paid. They opened the house to strangers for $1 per visitor, traded privacy for survival. They paid in dignity, sacrificed to necessity. The federal government paid. It bought the forest for Pisgah National Forest. It paid rent to store National Gallery art during World War II. Taxpayer dollars contributed to Biltmore's survival indirectly through those transactions. And you paid. Every tourist who has walked through those doors since 1930. Every admission ticket, every wedding held in the gardens, every bottle of wine purchased, every meal eaten in the estate restaurants, every night spent in the inn. Biltmore survives today because millions of paying visitors fund its preservation. The house that George built for one family now belongs, functionally, to everyone willing to buy a ticket. That was the price of survival. Opening what was private, sharing what was exclusive, accepting that beauty, expensive, cannot be sustained by one fortune alone. How much does the dream cost? Construction. $5 million in 1895, $189 million today. Furnishings. $1.5 million then, $40 million now. Annual operations in 1920, $250,000, over $7 million today. Current annual operating costs are not public, but certainly run tens of millions. Preservation is not a one-time expense, but an ongoing obligation that never ends. George believed he could afford it. He was wrong. Not because he lacked money, because he underestimated the cost of permanence. Buildings this large demand constant care. Neglect for even a few years creates damage that requires decades to reverse. The dream George built was beautiful. It was also, financially, a trap. Once started, it could not be stopped without losing everything. Edith understood this. She chose survival over sentiment, sold the forest, cut the staff, opened the doors. Her choices saved Biltmore, but they also fundamentally changed it. The quiet refuge George wanted became a public attraction. The transformation was necessary. It was also irreversible. The question is whether what survived is still George's vision or something else entirely. The house stands, the rooms glow, the architecture stuns, but the purpose has changed. From private retreat to public museum, from family home to tourist destination, from one man's sanctuary to a business sustaining thousands of jobs. Is that success or surrender? Biltmore survived, but it survived by becoming something George never intended. He wanted quiet. He got crowds. He wanted self-sufficiency. He got dependence on admission fees. He wanted permanence. He got adaptation. The house is magnificent. The cost was not just money. It was vision compromised, privacy abandoned, dreams bent to accommodate reality. George built Biltmore to escape the world. The world invaded anyway. Through federal taxes, through depression, through war. Through the simple arithmetic that beauty, this expensive, cannot exist in isolation. The real cost of Biltmore is this. It proved that even Vanderbilt wealth has limits. that grand visions demand compromises their creators never imagine, that permanence requires flexibility, that survival means accepting help from places you never expected. The house stands because Edith sold what George loved, because Cornelia opened what George protected, because William Cecil turned what George built for privacy into a business built on exposure. Each generation paid in different ways. Each made choices the previous generation would have found unthinkable. That is how Biltmore survived. Not through wealth alone, through adaptation, through willingness to let go of what could not be kept in order to save what mattered most. The house itself, the architecture, the craftsmanship. The proof that ambition at this scale is possible, even if sustaining it requires methods the ambitious would reject. Biltmore teaches a hard lesson. Build something magnificent, and it will demand everything you have. Then it will demand everything your children have. Then it will demand everything strangers can give through admission fees and wine sales and overnight stays. And if you want it to survive, you will say yes to all of it. Because the alternative is watching it fall. George built a palace. His heirs built a business. Both were necessary. Neither was sufficient alone. Biltmore endures because beauty and pragmatism finally learned to work together. The dream that started with one man's vision now belongs to everyone willing to pay for a glimpse. That is the price. That is the cost. That is survival.